Hi, Professor Bob Young back with some more instructional videos on solving linear equations. Now, in the first videos that we did on linear equations, when we were solving them, we got some answers which we checked by plugging back in and make sure they worked using these 5 steps. But did y'all know that not every equation has an answer, or some have a multitude of answers? So those are the ones we're going to look at next. So we're going to talk about what's called identities, conditional equations, and contradictions. So an equation satisfied by all real numbers for the variable is called an identity. Or what you're going to end up with is 2 of the same things on each side of the equal sign. Solving for x ends up with a statement such as 0 equals 0. Now here's a real basic example, and you can see that using the distributive property, these 2 creatures are going to be the same. But you may not always see that in more elaborate equations. So in this one, distributing, we're going to get 3x plus 3 equals itself over here. Now, does everyone see if you take the letters left by subtracting 3x, and you subtract 3 from both sides and take the numbers right, so I'll do my L, L, and R thing, that whenever you have an identity, which is the same thing, that you will always result in 0 equals 0. Now, the solution set for this, just don't put 0 equals 0 on your test or anything. X is the set of all real numbers. So every number in the universe will satisfy these type of equations. You could put in 5 for x, check it, it'll work. You could put in -1, 2/3, -0.7. Every number in the universe that's a real number will satisfy. Continuing. An equation satisfied by some numbers but not others is called a conditional equation. So what I like to say for a conditional equation is a conditional equation has an answer and it will check. All right, so I'm going to put that in here. Conditional equation has an answer. And maybe to be on the safe side, plural answers. So you can see on this real basic one here, if we divided both sides by 2, we would get x equals 2. And plugging that back in, see, under this condition and this condition alone, it satisfies the equation, thus called a conditional equation. And type number 3, here we go. An equation that has no solution is called a contradiction. This equation will end up with a false statement when the variables go out, such as 0 equals 5. So you could see if someone gave you an equation like this, and again, this is a basic one, that if you subtracted x from both sides, your x's would go out. I mean, someone's saying, hey, solve for x, and you don't have any x's left, and you end up with this, like, So you would have to say that there is no number in the universe that satisfies that equation. So which one do y'all like better? The ones that are identities that have all numbers as solutions, ones that are contradictions that have no answers, or the conditionals, which you can check? Think about that, and we'll move on. Decide whether this equation is an identity, conditional, or contradiction. So we're just going through, like they may throw you some of these in the homework and so forth, or on a test, and you're going to go through and do the same thing here. So we're going to look at this and say, hey, if this were an equation, distribute that -2 through both sides. We get down to the second statement here. Collect like terms, CLT, from that original handout here, and look what we get. X minus 8 equals x minus 8, and when we do the old letters left by subtracting x from both sides, and I'll put LL there, and numbers right by adding 8 to both sides, we get this statement 0 equals 0. So we know in this case it's an identity, and x would be the set of all real numbers. So these are pretty easy to get once you understand what the 3 mean. All right, let's find out if this one's an identity, conditional equation, or a contradiction. So we end up with 0 equals 0 here, another example of all real numbers. This one, we just add 4 to both sides. And what we're going to end up with is a nice 5x equals 15 down here. So this one certainly will have an answer. So this is a conditional equation. Came out with something that we can plug back in and check, and it has a solution set of 3. And yet another example here. When we distribute and collect like terms and so forth here, notice we don't get the same thing on both sides. Notice when we subtract the 9x's from both sides here, and in this example, they really didn't take the numbers to the right, so we went ahead and we put LL. Now let's take the numbers to the right just to have fun here. See, they came out with something false right away when they moved the 9x's, but if we wanted to continue here, we could get even 0 equals 10. So once the variables go out, you're going to see something smells of fish or something is not right. So that is a false statement. Therefore, you have no solution. You have a contradiction, because that makes absolutely no sense, either one of these, what you end up with down here on the bottom. So in summary, here's what we end up with. If solving step 1, a linear equation, leads to a true statement, such as 0 equals 0, it's an identity, solution set all real numbers. 2, if it leads to a single solution, such as x equals 3, it's a conditional, and it will check back in the problem. 3, if solving the equation leads to a false statement, contradiction, no solution. So Bob Young signing off, another instructional lesson.